just like a spark that's breaking out. Can't make a stop, can't turn back now. We know that there's no room for doubt. No, we can't turn back now. I see danger in your eyes. They know we'll burn down the night. Only just like the sunrise. You know that we gonna light it up. Tonight, we gonna light it up. Tonight, we gonna light it up. Just like the sunrise, we gonna light it up.
Hello, hello. Coming to you live from rainy Virginia. We are live here on the HVAC God live show. Thank you, if you are watching this, for taking time out on your Tuesday night to spend some time with me. I've got some announcements tonight. Hopefully the title, the thumbnail of the video, hopefully you knew that. Because we are going to be taking your questions live, but I'm also going to be making a few announcements tonight. Before we get to the sponsor of tonight's show, let's say hello to you guys. SFL, good to see you as always. Walking the dog first. Eli, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Gil, as always, good to see you. Bob, one of our longtime friends, good to see you. And of course, Gary, good evening. Brian says, what's up? Hope you are doing well. Brian here from Central California. Hey, Brian, thanks for joining us. Florida, I like it. I like it. So a couple of you across the country, and good to see you as well, Ryan. Yeah, I've got some crazy stuff going on personally, professionally, all that fun stuff. And we will be getting to all of that tonight. I'm excited to unveil some new things. Some things that are actually not new, but I felt like I couldn't talk about before because I was working somewhere. And so now I feel like I have the freedom to unveil publicly a few things. And we're going to get into that in just a little bit. Send it north to CT. Oh, did you say rain? Gotcha. Yeah, it's been kind of sprinkly here in Virginia the last couple days. So, but yeah, ready to unveil a few things tonight. But before we do all of that, as always, let's take a moment to thank the sponsor. They help us keep the lights on. And tonight's sponsor is my wife's business. Okay. Sam says, I am here. I love my new 5-year-old Daikin communicating system. That's awesome, Sam. Did you get the fit or did you get the 20 seer, the cube style? Which one did you get? You are welcome if you're joining us to drop a question in the chat. That will pop up. Let me see if I can make that happen. It will pop up right here. And we will, of course, answer questions. We are sometimes joined by other pros in the chat who know answers to questions that I don't, because that happens. And unlike some of the people I'm going to talk about tonight, I don't think I know everything. So there's that. But let's get to a couple things. Again, if you have any questions revolving around HVAC, anything like that, go ahead and drop those in the chat. A lot of new things coming, a lot of changes coming, and so on. Let's uh let's get into it. So professionally and personally for me, I had to leave my job on Friday, and was not an easy decision, believe it or not. Especially after owning a business for 12 years, it was a big leap for me to go back and work for someone else. And I felt like I adapted well, considering that was a transition. And so I've been there for almost 2 years now, and I'm going to tread lightly. My goal is not to air out any dirty laundry tonight. I'm sure there's plenty I could air out, especially having a front row seat to companies that I've bidded against for the last 12 years, to actually see what they're doing and see that not everyone does things the same way. I'll just say it that way. And yeah, so it's been interesting, but I don't have anything bad necessarily to say about the company I left. They are transitioning, they are making changes, people are getting new roles there, and whenever someone gets a new role, they're going to try to put their thumbprint on that position and or the company. And so there's some of that going on, and I have no problems with that. I think if you are getting paid to do a job, you should do it. My whole thing, I will say though, when I took that position, I was very upfront. I was very transparent. I said, "Look, I live far away, you know. I'm selling my company here to take this position. I own other businesses. I have other obligations." And I was very upfront about everything right out the gate. And that eventually seemed to have become a problem for them. And so we just decided, or I decided it wasn't a fit, um, and decided to leave. That said, because I've now left, and for those of you that didn't know, I was working for an HVAC distributor in the industry, and probably no one you've ever heard of. They're more on the wholesale side of the business. Only contractors usually deal with them. Homeowners don't. Um, but now, because I'm not working there, I feel like I can unveil some things, and so some of it I'm still going to keep close, you know, close to my chest for now. I'm not going to show all my cards, but I can tell you this: if you are located, if you happen to see this and you're located in the Virginia Beach, Richmond, or Fredericks, excuse me, my 4-year-old is not going to bed. I can hear her. But if you're in the Virginia Beach, Richmond, or Fredericksburg areas, and you need HVAC work done, I'm not going to unveil everything, but um, I'll just say that I am not out of the industry. And so um I'll just say that. So especially Virginia Beach and Richmond, we're going to be doing some really cool things in those areas, very out of the box things, especially if you're a homeowner. And we're going to be doing, offering services there that are unique. We'll just say that. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited to publicly announce everything in the future. So that'll be cool. But yeah, it's been interesting because I actually enjoy teaching classes I've learned. I enjoy helping others. And so I've approached some others in our industry since Friday to see, what else is going on, what else can I help with on that front. And so I think there might be some doors that open on that, as well. And I'll be excited to announce that too. Uh, I don't intend on leaving the HVAC industry in any way. It's one of those deals where if people need your services and they're willing to allow you to be a part of something, then great. But if they're not, then I'm going to go create my own thing. I'm going to have to, right? I have a family I have to take care of and all of that. So I'll get off of that. I do have a couple other things I'm going to touch on later in the show that kind of revolve around all of this. But let's get back to the chat here. Eli says, I tried working for another company, but it is not working for me. Interesting. Interesting. Do tell if you're willing to. Sam says, I got the Fit system in 2020. Daikin only had 2 communicating systems for sale. Okay. Very cool. One thing that is interesting that Daikin does, and I think a few other companies do too, and those of you that don't know, Daikin is one of the sponsors on our channel. I've got a really cool video coming out soon, but we have a pile of footage to get through to get that video out. But Daikin did a competition internally. So, all kinds of different skills that they use internally, and they do competitions with it. It's really fun and cool. I cannot wait for that video to come out. So make sure you stay tuned to that. But I don't think Daikin's the only one. I think there's other companies that do this too. They have some systems out there where they can do communicating or non-communicating. So some of the furnaces, some of the heat pumps, systems like that, you can have a high-end proprietary communicating system and have all the advantages when it comes to that with errors and all of that. But they also have non-communicating as well. And before you say, well, don't all companies make systems that are non-communicating and communicating, right? Yes, I'm saying they make some systems that are either one. You can pick one, and that's the controller you would use. And I've always thought that was kind of interesting that, I thought it was pretty cutting edge, believe it or, in my opinion. No bridge burning. I felt like I did pretty good, Neil. I didn't trash anybody. So hopefully I didn't burn any bridges. I actually, that was actually the reason I left. I felt like I could stick it out and then, burn bridges and know that it wasn't a fit, and only for it to lead up to something that would make it to where I'm leaving on bad terms. And I instead opted to say, I already know it's not a fit. Let's just sever ties on and me leave on good terms. So I felt like I did. And yeah, Emery says, hey Josh, been out of the country and came back to, oh my gosh, came back to a broken AC start cap. Okay, well, capacitor, they go bad sometimes. Neither the fan or the compressor, first time in 10 years since our unit was installed, did it break down? Why did it stop? Yeah, well, they don't last forever, right? So 10 years without a single breakdown. I mean, we'd all love to get 20 or 30, but I'd say that's pretty good, Emery. You don't be too upset by that. I'm sure there's plenty of other folks that would enjoy going 10 years and not having a single problem. And capacitors do go bad, especially some of the ones being made today, if you're with me. And I used to tell customers they're sort of like windshield wipers on a car. Unfortunately, they're just going to have to be swapped every now and then. They're probably not ultimately designed to be that way, but that's the truth. Ryan says, I'm waiting for the first YouTube HVAC influencer to become a traveling HVAC expert and do installs for homeowners across the country, partner with local contractors for license if needed. I think, I think there's some of that out there, Ryan. I have not personally done that, but I do know of some other quote unquote influencers that have, done things such as that. I know Taddy has. I know that Ty Brannaman and all the folks at the Grit Foundation are doing some things right now with training and traveling. But yeah, actually, that kind of reminds me. I had talked to Ty a while back. Yeah, I think he was on our show and he told us about that. I'd love to kind of get an update on that because this is really cool. Ryan says, I'm not that far, Josh. Travel to North Carolina to install my system. Yeah, North Carolina's crazy, pal. You guys have rules that we don't have up here. So like if I install a heating and air system, as long as I pull a permit and I do everything I'm supposed to, I can reconnect to, the electric and things like that. And I don't think I think I've been told, I could be wrong, but I think in North Carolina, you're not allowed to. That an electrician has to, if I remember correct. It's something y'all have down there that is definitely above and beyond most states. I don't remember what it is. You also, I think, have to pull permits down there for things that most states you do not. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it is a thing. Brian says, "Are you at liberty to say which name brand or brands you would not recommend ever? In your opinion, what are your thoughts on Ream or Rude?" I think I tried to not bash any brands, Brian. There's only one brand that I've ever bashed over and over and over, and that was Nordon, or now Nortec. And that's only because they really did me dirty years ago. On warranties, several warranties. They kept not honoring their warranties, and me as a small business owner, it was a big deal because I kept having to eat stuff to do things right, to take care of my customer. And so they're the only ones I really bash, over and over. And of course, times have changed and they've been, I think, bought out and all of that. But Riemann Rude, I think they have a decent reputation in our industry. I wouldn't say they're one of the big three, right? A lot of us kind of argue over who the big three are. I don't know too many HVAC guys that would argue and say that Ream is one of the big three, but I'm sure they're out there. Um, and I'd say they're known for being a Ford or Chevrolet. They're not going to be a Rolls Royce or a Lamborghini, but I don't think they have a horrible reputation in our industry or either. So, Sam says, I think Daikin now has 8 communicating systems available. I've never counted them. I mean, if you count all the different matches, it's probably, way more than that. Way more than 8. But yeah, I know it's more than a few. I know that for sure. Ryan says Emory right after warranty was over, right? Yeah, so you had that 10-year warranty and then you had a failure. You came home too. Brian says, Emory, I know, just wondering his overall thoughts. Yeah. I I think it's funny that they're the only company, Ream that is, that has, now we're seeing imported products that do the same, but they're the only one of the brands traditionally that had the reversing valve energize and heating mode. And that was kind of their thing for the longest time. And they had their reasons, that they would say, but I always thought that was interesting that was their thing that they stuck to. And they have. I mean, even right up until today, you buy a system and it's going to energize that reversing valve in heating mode. Eli says, I pay all bills for me and my family, and the company is great, paying great medical. But after working for myself, the financial working for our company, it was not as great as I working for myself. I hear you, man. It's tough, especially, you know, again, I don't want to bash anyone, but I will say one of the conversations that were had, one of the folks said to me, look at all that I've done for this company. I've done this, and this. I've moved and I've, bled this company's colors and all these things. And I just remember when I was hearing that, I remember thinking to myself, well, this better work out for you. For me, I have some backup plans. So it better work out for you. If you have sacrificed that much, I hope it works out for you. For you to have sacrificed that much for a company. I really do hope that you get what you invested in it out of it. Because it is nice. God has blessed my family and I with the ability to not have to always say yes, right? So if you are at a company and they're treating you horribly, or they're asking you to do unreasonable things like pick up your family and move elsewhere and do all these things that some companies will ask you to do, I feel bad for folks that are in that position, that they're not able to say, you know what, no, that's not best for my family. So no, I'm not doing that. So you know, I hear you though. I hear you, Eli. Ryan says I know two electrifications. Let's do it. Bob says Emery with 100-degree temps capacitors can fail. That's right. Another problem can be power surges during storms. I think capacitors, heat is obviously their biggest enemy, but yeah, they just fail sometimes. And yes, it is a lot of times on that hot summer day, right? Tech Junkie says, "What's the big announcement?" You have to go back and watch, buddy. Uh, no, I'll just tell you. I'm no longer working for another man. I'll say that. I'm now fully self-employed. I own 3 businesses, some more profitable than others. Some you wish were more profitable than they are, right? Um, but that was basically the announcement. I'm still tied to the HVAC industry, and I think I always will be. And I feel like I'm obligated to be. If I'm going to be on here and I'm going to be giving folks advice, then I need to be drinking the same Kool-Aid that I'm passing out, right? That's probably a horrible analogy based on history. Emery says, "Why did the faulty start cap prevent both the fan and compressor from starting?" Uh, so I'm assuming that you have a dual capacitor in there. Most systems do, and that dual capacitor has a common, and it has leads for your Herm and your fan, which feed both the fan and the compressor. So a full failure of that capacitor. Now I have seen them half fail, so they're it'll still get the fan going, but not the compressor, right? But that's probably why. So you had a failed dual capacitor, and that's why it was not able to start either of the devices. Eli says, "I love my Daikin." Nice. Emery says, "Fun fact: Ream is 100 years old this year." Wow, good fact. Little trivia for you guys. Ryan says Bosch energizes in heating mode too. Yeah, a lot of those imported products from China, they also energize. So, you know, I mean, we could probably, Hisense, Friedrich, Medea, I think, Gree, a lot of those brands energize and heating, and a lot of mini splits do too, believe it or not. So even if it's a American brand, a lot of those mini split inverter type systems um, are, they'll energize the reversing valve in heating mode. Emery says, Neil, it was the start cap and run cap was still good. Ryan says, Josh, I got my Griffin Air hat ready to go, my friend. I am not coming to North Carolina. I would, if you meet me halfway and we're still in, on the Virginia side, we can do some work together. But yeah, as much as I like you, I would come down there and hang out with you, but I'm not coming down there to fool with the the rules of an entirely new state and all of that. I feel like I've got my state down pat, and I'll just stay with that. I will say too, I'm going to take a break from the chat for a moment, because another thing I kind of mentioned a moment ago, I've had a front row seat to seeing how other companies have done it. And just in the theme of not bashing others, I'm not going to sit here and say this company does this wrong, this company does that wrong. But I will say this, since there are folks out there that have had plenty to say about me now that I'm no longer at that company, I have not seen any of those companies except for one. And I'm not going to say which one, but none of them were near me. I've only seen one other company that was not near me that had as high a standards as I had at my company. None of the companies anywhere near me have high enough standards that they would have made it at my company. Um, so I can say that with all confidence, and I can also say with all confidence that there are companies that, well, I'll just say this. At my company, at Griffin Air, I never had to go back to a callback more than 3 times. Did I have a few head scratchers? Yes. Did I have a few that, we had to kind of figure a few things out and maybe go back out there a couple times? Sure. But I never had to go back more than 3 times. And if you are going back to a house 4, 5, 6 times, 6 callbacks, 5 callbacks, you're the problem. Tech support ain't the problem. You are the problem. So I'll just say that too, because there's been plenty said about me. There are companies that, with all these callbacks, uh, they think tech support's the problem. No, no, you're the problem. I'll say that for, again, with all confidence. Griffin Air, I'm saying this on live stream that any customer I ever had could see, and any of them can call me out live, and I can say with all confidence, I never had a house that we installed a system in and had to go back 5 times. Never. But I also was very diligent. We installed all the systems. I had some great guys and gals. I had a few ladies that worked with me over the years, and we just had really high standards. We installed it to the T. You know, we would walk away from jobs. That's one problem that a lot of companies have, is they won't walk away. If you get there and the customer is not willing to let you size the ductwork properly or do a proper manual J, manual D, manual S, and if you don't know how to do those things, then you should probably go find out how, or hire someone to do them or whatever. But we didn't cut those corners. And that's probably why we didn't have that many callbacks. I'm not saying we never had callbacks. I'm not perfect. I don't know everything, but I knew what I knew, and we were good at what we did. Um, so anyway, I'll just say that and stop. Greg says most overseas equipment energizes the reverser valve in the heat mode. Rheem was once a Japanese owned conglomerate, even though its beginnings are from Canada in water heaters. Interesting. Greg, you are a smart, you have all kinds of trivia going on. Tech Junkie says, I need to open my own business in HVAC. I agree. Just from our conversations over the years or months, Tech Junkie, you know your stuff. We've had conversations where you definitely know your stuff. Neil says, but you have a start cap with a run cap outside. Uh, I'll say this on the whole cap thing. There are systems that have start capacitors and run capacitors, like single stage systems out there, and then there are some that just simply have a run capacitor. So you may have just had that, Emery. Just kind of throwing that out there. Sorry, I'm gonna try to catch up with chats, because it's hard when I'm talking about this and then I got to go back and chat. So, but I appreciate you guys in the chat, and keep it going. Ryan says, I remember you saying you're an electrician too, but your next company will you consider doing both HVAC and electrical? The electrical industry is changing fast too, with high tech panels. It's a great question, Ryan. I think, so for those of you that don't know what he's talking about, I actually went to school originally to be an electrician, and I think that's done me well in the HVAC trade, right? So when other guys might know how to, do duct work and build a beautiful transition better than me, where I've always outshined others is the wiring side of things, because I had that background. For me, I fell in love with the HVAC industry along the way. And I never, even after going to school and working at companies, I never felt that way about electrical. But it's certainly something to consider, especially if the right opportunity came along. Solar panels are becoming a thing. And I actually think that a lot of folks are not qualified to be doing them, right? So, in my opinion, and this is my opinion only, if you are doing solar panels, you should probably be an electrician, a licensed electrician. And a lot of them, most of them probably are not. So, just something to throw out there. Emery says, I wish it waited 2 months so it wouldn't be out of warranty. Yeah, that's crazy. All jokes, Josh, I wouldn't expect anyone to travel. I actually had someone in Texas one time that wanted me to come down there because they had called a bunch of people out there, and I had to, tell them I'm not that much smarter than the next guy. I just feel like I'm more willing to share sometimes, and I am smart enough to read the instructions, right? But yeah, they were gonna bring me down to Texas, which would have been interesting to figure out what was going on. Josh, is there a particular video you would like to show customers and friends who constantly complain when their units are oversized with undersized venting and refuse to fix it? Other similar issues? That's a great question, Lieutenant Duran. I mean, it's obviously a problem, and it's a problem that's pretty common. I'm actually going to see if I can put that in my notes to possibly revisit in an upcoming video. Let's see. How can I can't copy and paste that, is it? So oversize. Yeah, I think we address we've talked about it on my YouTube channel, and there are plenty others that have addressed that as well on their content, talking about systems being oversized for the space, for the home that it's in. But I don't know that we give it enough credit uh, to what you're talking about, especially a lot of homeowners thinking they can go from, say, a 3 to a 3.5 ton system, and not understanding that you just added a whole lot more airflow to that system. And now you've got ductwork that could or they could possibly cause you problems because of it. Certainly a higher, especially with a lot of systems today where the ductwork is undersized to start with. You know, you do technical call support for tech. I do not anymore. Greg says California, not Canada. Oh, gotcha. Sorry, my bad. Ream started. I didn't know that. That's good trivia though. Gil says I have to go. Good night. Good night, Gil. Good to see you. Brian says I hate and detest callbacks. Callbacks equals sin. I have only had one callback, an Arco air unit, bad pressure switch out of the box, new unit. It happens, I guess. Are you saying you've only ever had one callback in your entire career, Brian, or just one this year? Because if it's your entire career, that is impressive. Sam says, seems like it should be standard for all heat pumps to energize in heat mode since AC is traditionally the default function of the machine. And that's funny you say that, Sam. That's a lot of times the argument that I'll hear from people that like Ream. They'll argue that. Um, and I don't know that it's a horrible argument. I'm not sure it really matters one way or the other, but I think it's a valid argument, especially if your solenoid fails. You might still have AC that night, right? If you don't have heat, well, you might have backup heat of some kind, but you don't usually have any sort of backup AC. So, since AC is traditionally the default function of the machine and later adapted to do heating, it should be cooling first. Emery says a separate question: does it make sense to install a mini split alongside a regular ducted central system? Because my neighbor did this and I question this. So it depends on the house, Emery. I have seen many a time where folks will use mini splits to fix zoning problems, fix ductwork problems. And what I mean by that is if you have one room that's hotter than the rest, instead of actually fixing the issue, I have seen where folks will install a mini split in that room. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. If it's the cheaper way to go and you need more capacity in that house. I mean, I like mini splits. I think uh they certainly have their place. I would my wife would shoot me, but I would only do mini splits in my home if she was okay with that. If she was okay with something hanging on our wall, I think they're more efficient, they're quieter, they don't have duct leakage, they have less problems if installed properly. Um, I think they have a lot of upsides, and you can do better zoning with them, more controlled. I mean, I could just continue to go on and on. In fact, I think I have in other videos. I think I've done videos where we specifically talk about the upside of doing mini splits. And even if you don't want something hanging on your wall, there's plenty of other options out there today. There's ducted mini splits, there's floor mounts, ceiling mounts, cassettes, all kinds of options today. Options that we didn't have when I got in this industry. You know, when mini splits first started coming out, it was wall hung or nothing. So Greg says exactly why overseas units are designed like that, Sam. Gary says, question, Josh, how is that new office space coming along? Are you talking? I'm not sure what. Oh, I know what you're talking about. Sorry. Sorry. I was thinking about our co-work space I had years ago and for some reason, but anyway, Greg or Gary, sorry, not Greg, Gary, there are not enough hours in the day for me to do everything I need to do in a day. And including work on that space, but it will get done soon. I think if the stars align and everything goes well, I'll be in it in before next summer is my goal. And there's no reason I shouldn't be other than time, right? The building itself is kind of pretty much done. It's just the cosmetic stuff, getting the floor down, getting the little bit of paneling on the walls. I did these MDF panels that look kind of cool. And I didn't want to do drywall. I hate it. Although I think we're going to have a little bit of drywall to do on the ceiling, but that's neither here nor there. Yeah, so that's how that's coming. I appreciate you asking. I need to get it done. That's probably might be the kick in the butt that I need. I would like to see more people in HVAC get into building science. Brian, me and you, man, right here. I was literally just talking to a guy today about that. And because he's like, he knows a lot about building science. So yeah, homes are being built much tighter, and many pros are still only changing boxes and not looking at everything. Touche. Emery says, so hypothetically, if have a 3-ton unit on ductwork designed for 2.5 unit, is it bad? Hypothetically, yes. Hypothetically, you're going to be pushing more air through there. Your static's going to be significantly higher, and you might not have as much extra capacity as you think because of the problems it would cause. So undersized ductwork is definitely a problem we have in our industry. Brian says, I have a mini split in my bedroom to supplement heating and cooling in one room, and I love it. Yeah, I mean, it's very, especially in bedrooms. That's usually where it is. If folks have a den that's warmer than the rest of the rooms in the house, that's tough to deal with. But if they have a bedroom, they'll usually put a mini split in there and fix that issue quick, fast, and in a hurry. Greg says American manufacturers think heat is more important, so the valve solenoid fails and the heat still works. Heat is the priority on a carrier train, etc. That was the thinking in the 80s. That's interesting thinking. I wonder if that was if that's just what they were telling us, or if that was actually true, if they actually valued heating more. And the reason I say it that way is most systems have backup heat sources. So if you think about it, it actually does make sense when folks argue the other way around. But these days, as we see more and more systems come out that are more and more efficient, more and more ability to heat in low ambient temperatures, I would dare say we might start seeing systems with no backup heat, and then you're back to being definitely right on that, Gary, because if that reversing valve for whatever reason is not energizing and not shifting, then heat might be valued more at that point, no doubt. I found a BDP heat exchanger at the wholesaler where the exchanger was cracked straight across all bays. Found it while at the wholesalers. Good thing you checked it. That's crazy. Sam says, Greg, science is the same in America as overseas. The original heat pumps were not good in cold weather, so their thinking was off even then. Saying pointing out the obvious. That was pretty good, actually. That's a great point, actually. When I got in this trade, heat pumps, if it got below 40 degrees outside, you were starting to lose capacity already. And then by the time you got down to say 25 degrees, I'm not saying they were useless, but a lot of them were pretty close to useless. You were happy if it was providing any sort of heat rise at that point. So Brian says only 2 callbacks ever, Josh. Me and my guys are laser focused on providing the most excellence of service during our new installs and or changeouts. As a business owner, it's priority number one. That's great, man. That's really good. I can't say that I never had 2 callbacks, but we had years, summers go by with very few callbacks. It was always when I would hire new people and they either were not quite with it yet or they weren't going to work out, if you're with me. And then we would have some callbacks. It always drove me nuts when it was those small things, right? I remember we hired a guy years ago and he, of course they always tell you what you want to hear. And he had told us he had said all the right things and we had him just doing simple maintenances. And so he would go out and, pull the disconnect and he would clean the systems, clean coils and so on. And we got to one and I got a call at the end of the day to go back to one. And I went back and he had left the disconnect out. And of course I let him know. And then and I waited until like the next day to tell him, right? The next morning and say, hey, listen, I had to run back out there late yesterday because you left the disconnect out. And then it was, I don't know, maybe a week or two later, he did it. And it was like 10 o'clock at night. And I was probably more frustrated than I should have been. And so at 10 o'clock at night, I texted him and I'm like, hey, man, I'm out here at 10 o'clock at night because you left the disconnect out again. And he quit the next morning. He said, maybe this isn't the trade for me, is what he said. So anyway. Brian says there are a lot of scumbags in the trade already. I am not adding to the list. Quality and professionalism, my friend. Brian, you and I would get along very well, my friend. I it's odd to me when folks are focused on other things. I think quality should be right there at the top. And what's interesting to me, and Brian, you probably would agree with this, is how many folks in our industry say the same things. So they say, oh, I only do high quality work. I only do everything right. And then they're the ones that you have to go behind. Right. I could think of one of the companies that I was helping in my former role. And, I would have to go behind them on things and they weren't even doing load calculations. And I'm not saying I did a load calculation on every install we ever did, but there were certainly times when it made sense. When even if it's an existing home, you would say to the customer, we need to do a load calculation here and make sure this is right. And, and it's up to the company whether or not they provide that free or not, or whatever the ins and outs of that. That's neither here nor there. But to simply not do them at all in today's day and age, especially with all the tools that we have. I have a company that we're going to be doing a video with very soon that makes it very easy for a contractor to do load calculations all with an iPad. That you just literally use the camera on your iPad. So make sure you stay tuned for that video. That's going to be a lot of fun. But there's no excuses today. If you're not doing quality work, then shame on you. Josh, what do you think of the Daikin One Lite? Also, if you can a Goodman SD for significantly less than the Daikin Fit from the same company, is the Daikin the better option for the extra warranty? It's a loaded question, Ryan. You're going to get me in trouble, my friend. I think they're both great products. I will say a friend of mine does tech support out in the Midwest, and they have dealers that are putting the Goodman SDs in, and they're having very few issues because they're using the app on their phone to install them. And so it's a little more user friendly. They have less commissioning to do, or at least that's what he told me. I have not, I can't individually verify that, independently verify that. But yeah, I think way. As far as the Daikin one light, let me make sure that I have my right verbiages here. And I know what, yeah, yeah. So the one you're calling the Daikin one light, that's the one that they're putting in. Um, so you do all the commissioning with your phone instead of through the stat itself. So let's see. I think he shares it at the end of every show that he's here. So but feel free to share, Brian, no doubt. Brian and Ryan are getting along tonight. Yeah. Let's see. I don't have any news. I normally have some news articles lined up for you guys, and I didn't do that tonight because I knew I had a lot to share from the heart, if you will. Um, I will say again, folks that are so we're going to be rolling out some really cool things, and especially in Virginia Beach, Richmond as well here in Virginia. But in Virginia Beach, I've got some cool stuff coming to that area. We're going to be building out a company there that I've already been working on for a while, but we're going to explode down there. Um, I haven't ironed out the details though on some of the things that are going to affect who I do business with. And we'll see. But I can get my Daikin products from different suppliers based on where I'm located. So we'll see what happens on that front. Um, but yeah, anyway, I'm probably getting ahead of myself. Bob says, I had my misgivings when my Daikin condenser was matched with a Goodman air handler. So far, all is well. Time will tell. Sam says, what's the advantage of side discharge and why didn't they make them like that all along if it's so great? Oh, there's a great question. Well, why didn't they make them so let's start there. Why didn't they make them all along if they're so great? Well, I think years ago, especially if we were to go back to say the 70s and 80s when they first started making what we would maybe call trash can style where the fan blows out the top, there were products on the market because I remember demoing some of them. I remember one was similar to a side discharge where the fan blew out the front. It didn't look like what we would call today a side discharge. It was a big clunkier version of that, but they were making them back then. And I remember I replaced, I believe it was a York system that was like a horseshoe style. It had like two ends. It's kind of hard to describe, like a table, but instead of a table having legs, it had entire walls on the ends of the unit, and the fan it blew down. So it was like the coil was like up here and the fan blew down. And I thought that was interesting. So I think they've tried different things over the years. Steven says Tombstone. Is that what they called those systems? But yeah, so I think that the main answer to that though is I think years ago they were probably we didn't necessarily care about energy savings as much back then. So they were just kind of building things that got the job done. They weren't even doing like load calculations. They were slapping systems in left and right, AC systems, heating systems, and so on. But fast forward to today, what are the advantages of a side discharge? A couple of them are more obvious than others, such as they require less clearance. So some of these systems, they're putting them on wall brackets, just like a mini split, and they're right up against the side of the house with very little clearance. I mean, we're in some cases we're talking 4 or 6 inches away from the house, and it's still getting enough air pulled across that coil, which is quite interesting that they're able to do that. In comparison, a lot of trash can style systems require, you know, in some cases 18 to 24 inches of clearance. So there's that. The footprint is smaller on them, right? So you got this big clunky system. And now I know you might argue, well, years ago they weren't as big. Well, you're right. The SEER ratings were significantly lower. And to get those SEER ratings up and get them more efficient, they had to make bigger coils. And so some of these systems, I remember going up to a 5-ton system a couple years ago, and it was like I had to kind of, it was almost as tall as I was to just look over the edge and look down into where the compressor was. It was almost as tall as me. And so now that, they're just a little bit smaller, they require less clearance. But there's other reasons too. I mean, a lot of them, especially if they're inverter systems, they're quieter. They can be put on wall brackets and kind of put somewhere else, if need be. I think one could argue that they're easier to install, although some might argue that. They're easier to service, where a lot of them you'll pop the cover off the front, which I will say that all the brands need to do a better job of that. They need to, in fact, I would argue they need to have hinges, like just a couple screws and open a door, and then you can get to everything there. Some of these systems are quite a task to get to everything you need to get to service them. But it's partly because they're so compact. Ryan says overseas, mostly all residential systems are side discharge. Overseas, most of them are also ductless. We like our gas guzzling cars and our ducted air conditioners in the US. Greg says Daikin and Goodman are the same. I'm sure you can get an ASHRAE number. Ryan says, are manufacturers starting or planning to insulate side discharge units more to operate better in extreme hot climates like deserts? I've heard that's a con of SD units. I have not heard that. I'm not saying you're wrong. But all the systems have their limitations, right? I mean, so like for example, if you look at these new refrigerants, one of them works better in lower temperatures. One of them works better in higher temperatures. One of them's more efficient, et cetera, et cetera. So, I think that I actually think that a lot of homeowners would do themselves especially if they live in, a desert, out in the West, very hot, dry climates, if they would possibly look at options of keeping them out of the sun. I'm not saying you need to build a little house to keep your HVAC in, but being aware of your surroundings and trying to keep some shade on that unit. I think that's kind of common sense. Now, I've seen YouTube videos where they'll argue that maybe it doesn't operate any better. Maybe it doesn't, maybe it really doesn't even save as much, which makes no sense to me. If you especially have a system baking in the sun and the metal when you touch it is hot to the touch versus one that's in the shade and cold to the touch or cool to the touch. But I would argue that systems would even last longer if we do side discharge units. Now you don't have air that's blowing up; it's blowing out. And if you could build like a little roof over it, and you just kind of keep it out of the elements. It doesn't bake in the sun. It doesn't get rain or snow falling on it. Almost like a little garage for your car. And I'm probably going to get in trouble for this. There's probably other heat and air guys that are kicking and screaming, hearing me say that. But if you can install it in a way where you're protecting the equipment, getting a little more life out of it, do something still cosmetically pleasing. I'm not saying you need to have a carport, over your heating and air, but if you can do something that's, tasteful, but also functional, why wouldn't you do that? Just think about all the stuff that I have a garden hose that I've now gotten to the point where I'm just like, I'm gonna get as much life out of it as I can, and then it's eventually just gonna, I'm just gonna have to pitch it because I leave it outside all year round. And over the last couple years, that thing's gotten in pretty sad shape versus the ones that I keep in my basement. So anyway, that's kind of a going down a tangent. I know a lot of you guys probably don't even care, but yeah. Greg says the industry just adopted that round style in the 80s because they looked more modern than the tabletop models and side discharge singers. Uh, that's interesting. And I do remember Train had those round ones for a while, and I think was it ICP had round ones for a while too. So I bet you're right on that for sure. Which I don't mean that in a insulting way. I bet you're right. No, I just mean like that's interesting. I bet you're right on that. 94 says, I barely in my first year of the trade. There is so much to learn. Ever consider making troubleshooting and diagnosing videos? So I do have a channel called HVAC Guide for Pros. And we might do more of that sort of stuff, especially with this pivot now that I'm going to be doing professionally. Um, I think I would enjoy. I'll tell you, if I'm being completely honest with you guys, when I first started making YouTube content, I don't even know that I felt worthy enough to make videos to teach others. Although I felt like I was really good at what I did, and I still feel that way. At the time, uh, I don't know. I just felt I don't want to say I didn't feel good enough because that's not, I mean, but I just felt like, there's certainly smarter people than me in this industry, and I'll leave it to them to make those kinds of videos. And so when I started making YouTube videos, there were plenty of heating and air guys making content for other heating and air guys, but there were very few of them making videos for mom. If mom's about to buy a heating and air system and give some advice, or need some advice, I wanted to make videos for her. And I did feel worthy enough to do that because I was doing that every day anyway with my business. And so fast forward to today, I feel like, I've gotten a few battle scars and I've been through it a little bit. And I certainly still don't think I'll say this too about the company I left. There's plenty of people there, some more than others, that feel the need to tell people how smart they are. And I feel like if you have to feel the need to tell everyone how smart you are, then maybe you're not the smartest in the room, even though you probably think you are. Zing. Um, so that said, I think fast forward to today, I do enjoy it, and maybe we will be doing some more of that. 94. What I don't want is what, you know, I put up with a lot when I had my business. I loved what I did. I loved my customers, but finding good help and finding folks with high standards that I'm not even one of those guys that's like, oh, you need to be here 10 minutes early every day and, tuck your shirt in and, none of that stuff. I'm not saying I don't believe in a lot of that stuff, but from a customer standpoint, if I have to teach you phone etiquette, like being kind and communicating well and I don't know, saying goodbye at the end of a phone conversation, that was some of the stuff I was having to deal with at my company. And I had gotten tired of it after a while. So, yeah. So, anyway, just throwing that out there. Greg says it was hard to make a curved radiator before. So, it was a side discharge and tabletop units. Yeah. Well, I mean, those units that I'm talking about that were round, they were not the radiator style looking coils, they were the spine fin, so they could get away with it a lot easier. Bob says, how many new homes are built too close to the next house and side discharge will be a problem? Well, I mean, is it going to be a problem or is it just something? Is it a problem or an opportunity, Bob? That's what I used to have a boss years ago that would say, it's not a problem, it's an opportunity to come up with a solution. So, but yeah, I mean, there's certainly plenty of opportunities out there for these systems, and it's not just side discharge units; it's just in general. So, Sam says side discharge units are also more efficient. Trash cans also have much wasted space between the core and compressor. Very good point. Gregory says listening from Northern Kentucky. Very informative chat. Thanks, pal. Appreciate you saying that. Um, as I make my way through these last few questions, folks, if we all know there's bad apples in our industry, I know of a bunch that I have been keeping my mouth shut about for the last 2 years. Wink. But if you know a good apple in our industry, if you know a good heating and air, plumbing, or electrical company, do me a favor, drop their name and where they're located down in the chat. We might be able to send some business their way and show them some love. Steven says, I wish all companies would stop installing dryers internally of outdoor units. Should stop. Field installation is best. I'll tell you, Steven, I hear you on that, but my argument is probably the same argument they would make. And that is that a lot of, and I know just from your comment, you're not one of them, right? There's plenty of guys in our industry, they'll just chuck those things. They won't install them. My argument to that would be more of I'm fine with them installing them, but let's install them on the evaporator coil somehow, if possible. I mean, it may not. There's already a lot going on in there, and it's pretty compact, and it probably isn't possible. But I would love for that thing to be out of the elements and somehow inside. I think in the next year or two, we're going to see a massive migration. At least I hope we would do, because I think it's needed, especially with the way things are done today and how so many folks don't do things correctly. But this massive migration over to crimped systems, and I know there's probably plenty of heating and air guys that would want to, come after me on that. But in a world where it is critical for these systems to not be uh, braised without nitrogen and all the trash that gets in there. If you crimp them correctly and you, pressure test and do all the things you're supposed to, um, can they fail? Sure. But so can braze joints, you know? And so I don't know. I could be wrong on that, but I do wonder, especially as we move towards air to water technology, we start seeing more and more crimp um, repairs done in our industry. Ryan says, Josh, there was a guy on your show from the HVAC Dope Show that talked about not installing SD units for his company in Arizona, but he does in Colorado. Yeah, it's interesting. You're talking about Howard. I think it's interesting how Howard has those businesses in different areas, and he's not the only one, right? In fact, there's other YouTubers that have businesses in different states, and to see how folks do them in different areas, and like in Colorado, they have to do the low NOx stuff, I'm sure, with the furnaces, and of course in Arizona, I think there's a lot more rooftop package units, which is so odd to me. Why you would put a unit on the roof in a very, very hot climate to bake in the sun, but that's just, they do things differently across the nation, and so on. Emery says, how are outdoor units designed to withstand these extreme weather conditions we are experiencing? Great question. I think you see folks consider that when they're doing their load calculations more and more. And, it's not so much that the units themselves are designed that way. It's that, the contractors themselves need to do their part when installing them. But, you know, they are designed to be outside, or at least they're expected to be outside. So there's some of that, and they have to keep certain things in mind when designing them. But things, I remember things like don't put the outdoor unit near a dryer vent, right? Seems like common sense, but common sense ain't common today, right? Greg says, Steve, mostly Goodman does that. Carrier and others are field braze, but it's a catch 22. Will all techs field braze? Very good point. Sam says, okay, so except for the physical size and footprint, can't you do anything with a trash can unit that a side discharge can, regardless of what direction the fan is placed, even inverters and communication. Yes, especially if you're not talking about sizing, clearances, and all the other advantages. Yeah, I mean, there are certainly communicating systems out there that are trash can style that are great as well. I put a bunch of them in over the years. Brian, will AC capacitors ever be built to last longer than current timeframes? Quality has been down for too long. Your thoughts, Josh? Uh, I think that if we have this conversation 10 years from now, that single stage systems with run capacitors are going to become a thing of the past anyway. I think everything's going to move to inverter, even if it's a non-communicating inverter. And of course, we're with the phase down of HFC refrigerants. We're going to probably be working with, I would guess, unless things change, we're all going to be working with R290 in residential, I bet. And it's going to be air to water, and it's going to be all, inverters most likely. We'll see. But that's that. I'm not the one predicting that. I'm regurgitating what everyone's telling me. Emery says, I thought Carrier adopted the round one in the late 60s or early 70s. Yeah, like I say, I remember ICPs. I can't speak for Carrier specifically, but yeah. They used to have those cube styles, but they were very rounded too on the edge, right? Much more than today. Today we see brands, yeah, they're all kind of rounded there where the coil is because you can't just do a hard 90. But I remember years ago where it was like a cube, but it was very, very loose cube, very close to being round. Side discharge units can have wind baffles to redirect the wind or air. Yep. That's a great point. That's something we didn't talk about, especially if there's not a lot of room there. Westinghouse designed and patented spine fin. Yeah, they did things right back in the yeah. The answer is top discharge. We hope to see you all next week. Have a happy summer. Yeah, summer is winding down. That's something we didn't talk about, right? So those of you that are here and we're going to be going into fall, what does that look like? I will say, I forgot to mention, because so much has been going on, that I am hearing through the grapevine that 454B it's still pretty expensive, but it's not, you folks are finally starting to be able to buy it again. Which they're probably they're probably figuring this all out because they have heard about all these contractors putting 410A and 454B systems, which is it's so crazy that that's even something we have to talk about. Greg says, and Westinghouse was spun off. You guys are talking about a lot of history stuff. Gary says, great question and answer show. I agree. We're going to have a guest in the next week or two, but I'll save that. Make sure you guys keep an eye on the promotions, but I've been talking to him. We got to figure out how the stars align. Brother says, we are having the slowest August ever. Really? I'm sorry to hear that. After a July that was slower than May. Is anyone else seeing this kind of thing? Where are you at, pal? I'm not seeing. Oh, Ryan says super slow too. I can tell you in our area, there are companies that had record Julys. The biggest month they ever had was in July. So maybe we just had a weird one here on the coast. I don't know. Not in Arkbrook in August. I thought GE started Spine Fin before Train bought them. That's what I've always heard, before American Standard bought, and then Train bought American Standard. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard to keep up with all that, right? And it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. Not these days. Brian says, Valley-wide home improvements. Shout out to them. Ready for a cold deer stand. Brother says, Utah. Okay, fair enough. It was 98 out today, and the board was practically empty. Wow. I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, definitely sorry to hear that. Well, man, I just want to say, especially if you're still here and you're, those of you that are on the East Coast with me, man, we're getting close to 10 o'clock. I'm going to be wrapping up again here shortly, but I do want to say thank you to everybody that's joined me. I'm not going anywhere. I'm still going to be in the HVAC industry. They can't kick me out. Y'all ever seen that Wolf of Wall Street where he's like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. Or even if there are plenty of folks that in our industry that would like me to, I have missed opportunities. I have turned down jobs over the years in the plainly, honestly, simply because I do not want my freedom of speech taken away from me. If I think you are falling short in our industry, or you're making a bad product or any of that, I want the freedom to say so. And unfortunately, that sometimes can hurt you professionally, and it probably has. It's probably hurt me professionally. I've probably lost money over the years in some way, shape, or form because I wasn't willing to give in. So if you hear me talk about a product on our channel, then it's a good product, right? Shout out to all of our sponsors, because if they're being talked about on our channel, then I actually genuinely believe that they're good. So Ryan says, I'm interested in setting another international guest again. The engineer from UK is always great to listen to. Yeah, he's a smart guy. Very cool. And I would like to hear where they're at with things. I haven't watched his content in a little while, but obviously things have been crazy on my end. But anyway, good night, Brian. Steven, I really appreciate that. Yeah, and I think some people think I'm just saying that to blow smoke. No. I mean, I was just offered a job to move to Tennessee, I don't know, 6 months ago, a year ago. And a lot of these folks, they want to control what you can and can't say. I had a guy from one of the chemical manufacturing companies go to my boss, go to our company, and try to get me fired several months ago because he didn't like what I was saying on my YouTube channel. So saying it how it is not easy. It's not free. And that's probably why you don't see a lot of other shout out to Super Cool. Ryan says, says you guys are good. But that's probably why you don't see a lot of other influencers doing it. There's only a few of us that are, really going to bat. And I'm not going to get into who says what or whatever, but there are some influencers that, you can just kind of tell that they're treading lightly and they're not going to call certain folks out, even when they have a very large platform. Some folks have 2, 3, 4 times the amount of followers that I have, and they still don't call it like they see it. And I get it. I can't fault them for that, especially if they're not trying to pick a fight. And I'm not either. I'm not trying to create enemies in our industry, but unfortunately, when you call a spade, you might create a few enemies. So that said, speaking of that, I had a guy trying to intimidate me the other day, and I'm like, you are not intimidating me. Anyway, when somebody is trying to be the alpha in the room, and it's like, come on, stop it, people. That said, looks like we still got some strong numbers, even as late as it is. Thank you to you guys. I'll be back next Tuesday night at 8:30 p.m., 5:30 p.m. Pacific. I'm not going anywhere until the Lord calls me up. I'll be here to answer questions and hopefully help folks and so on. So thank you guys. We'll see you next week. Have a great one. Take care.